Part 3 ended with the unification of Italy. We now move back in time for the final part. The overtures towards France to work towards a united Italy started in 1853, when Victor Emmanuel II joined the coalition of France and Britain to help the Ottoman Empire against Russia. He hoped to gain favor by bolstering his international reputation. The British and the French wanted to gain influence on the weakened Ottoman Empire, while Russia, constantly at war with the Ottomans in the Caucasus, was looking to incorporate the Orthodox Christian territories and potentially looking to take Istanbul to gain total dominance of the Black Sea. The British and the French preferred a weak Ottoman Empire over a stronger Russia, and thus to prevent any domination of the Black Sea region, the British-French Piedmont invaded the Crimea, stopping any Russian naval action in the Black Sea. On the Crimean Peninsula, several battles were fought, with the famous Battle of Balaclava, with the infamous Charge of the Light Brigade, ending at the Siege of Sevastopol. The French and English were odd bedfellows in this war, not really trusting each other. The English commander, Lord Raglan, was a veteran of the Napoleonic Wars, fighting the French with Wellington. This created a really messy war. Although this war did not create any map changes on our map, it was a significant event for later events in terms of Italian and French collaboration and creating the somewhat reluctant rapprochement of the English and the French that would always remain suspicious, with constant colonial rivalry. Equally, it set the tone of constant distrust between Western Europe and Russia, as still seen today. The map in Europe now remained relatively stable for a considerable time. We stop for a moment at the year 1848, not because there was a map change, but equally because of major events. This is the year of political unrest all over Europe, and the start of a military uprising of Italy against Austria. Austria experienced considerable internal unrest, and a major defeat of losing territory would have been disastrous. The father of Victor Emmanuel, Charles Albert, started a war against Austria in a first attempt to oust the Austrians out of the northern territories. Victor Emmanuel fought in this war, but the war was unsuccessful. The Italians surrounded the large Po Valley that the Austrians occupied, creating food shortages for the Austrian troops here. Cut off from Austrian communication and food supplies, their commander Radetzky fought off all attacks in detail, moving troops around within the Po Valley. The Austrians commemorated this victory, momentarily avoiding the territory losses that would happen in 1859, with the famous Radetzky March by Strauss. No map changes happened between the year of upheaval of 1848 and 1831. The year 1830 saw two wars of independence in Europe. The War of Independence of Belgium from the Netherlands, after the two territories were united in 1815 into the Kingdom of the Netherlands, creating a strong coastal state aligned with Britain, balancing against the power of France. However, Catholic Belgium did not seem to fit well with a Protestant northern Dutch state. The other was the First War of Independence against Ottoman rule by a Christian nation. The lower part of what would become Greece fought itself free as an independent state from the Ottomans. We have made a journey of about 200 years to arrive at the end of the previous big European war, the Napoleonic Wars, ending in 1815, when Napoleon was finally defeated at the Battle of Waterloo. In British history, this battle has considerable importance. They were part of it, played an important role, and it was the first time they defeated the Emperor himself in battle. However, Napoleon was effectively defeated in 1814 by the Russian, Austrian, and Prussian coalition, ending in the Congress of Vienna, where the fate of the European nations would be decided by the larger powers. The real wheeling and dealing of redrawing borders after the Napoleonic Wars was done here, and mostly based on if you fought with or against Napoleon. As France became a monarchy again, it actually lost minimal territory, as the Bourbons were unwilling to return to a completely hollowed out state. It is therefore that the balance of power between the empires was mostly maintained, seeing the growth of empires after 1815. The period before 1814 concerns the wars of the coalitions against France, with considerable yearly map changes during the Napoleonic Wars and the wars with revolutionary France. I will not deal with this, as I wanted to show the border changes in Europe as a result of conflict and politics, not necessarily the ebb and flow of battlefield victories during the wars. I will therefore show a single map from just before the revolution to indicate how different it looked. I chose the year 1772. Europe still saw considerable flux, as it consisted of a hodgepodge of many small states, constantly in conflict. The Austrian Empire is very large, but scattered, owning various territories across Europe. For example, owning large part of what is currently Belgium, not connected at all to the Austrian part in the east. Prussia was a small state in the east, consisting mostly of territory that's currently not in Germany anymore and part of Poland. It was Frederick the Great that started the military rise of this small nation, while before it was just one of the small to medium German states. However, one of the main aspects of this map is the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, a messy republican system in which a king would be elected, with representation of areas by smaller kings, dukes, and lower nobilities, who had to go back to their own peoples as well and find solutions. It was a state with high levels of democracy, religious freedom, high number of languages, and high ethnic diversity, different from Poland today, mainly consisting of Catholic Poles. The resulting messy compromise-based politics, per usual in democratic systems, would equally be its downfall in these contested times. More authoritarian kings were able to mobilize armies quicker and defeat this Polish state, as they did not have to vote for army contribution, especially when such kings were capable, like Frederick the Great. Empire building with centralized rule would be the norm from now on. The pushback from bottom-up, ordinary people against this resulted in the French Revolution in authoritarian France, ruled by the Bourbons. This saw chaos and more starvation than before. We have to remember that the period of the French Revolution was within what we call a mini ice age, when agricultural output saw frequent failures of crops, and thus the centralized rulers could not actually appease their people with high amounts of food. The anarchy and loss of control in France eventually created a counter-movement to stabilize governance, effectively creating a new set of royal houses, with the Bonapartes playing a big role. As a good example, the royal family of Sweden and Norway was created in 1818, crowning a former French commoner, rising to become Marshal Bernadotte. He married into the family circle of Napoleon as a military general. Napoleon made him one of the marshals of France. And Sweden chose Bernadotte because of these connections, although he was not their first candidate, but he was the only one willing to renounce Catholicism as a requirement for the Swedish throne. Bernadotte effectively betrayed Napoleon in 1813, siding with the Allies, when the situation for France was looking dire. With the blessing of the Allies, he could keep his Swedish crown and was officially crowned in 1818. Although the power of emperors, tsars, and kings was nullified after the First World War, replaced by charismatic creators of cult of personality, the origin of the big noble houses is very old. The Habsburg Empire was at its peak in 1556, under Charles V, who acquired this by birth after marriage of the Spanish royal line, marrying the Austrians. Later, the Spanish Habsburg fell out with the Austrians, splitting the family house in two again, even fighting the occasional war within the family. However, it shows the continuity and the length of rule for this noble house, effectively maintaining power through marriage and political power brokerage. In the same period, Henri of Bourbon became the first king to unite all of France, meaning the Bourbons would be in power for the next 400 years, while the first Romanov Tsar equally came in control of Russia proper around this same time, showing an equal length of relatively uninterrupted rule until the Russian Revolution. The clashes of these empires would result into the absorption, trading and switching of ownership of entire peoples and nations, with in my mind grudges of war atrocities accumulating across centuries. It is equally worthwhile to note the stability of many Western nations, with Britain, France, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Spain, Portugal, Denmark, Norway and Sweden hardly changing in their borders. The battleground of Europe was the Germanic center, Italy, the Balkans and the East. I looked across a period of around 250 years, which seems a considerable episode in history, and some people might feel that people would forget within this time span. However, the following interview with Bertrand Russell shows that this is not the case, indicating that older people, he is 80 in this interview, form a bridge between centuries. The interview is in 1950. I see this interview as taking place in the early modern period. It is a TV interview, so there is TV. There were jets and the atomic bomb was part of the modern world already. The interview clearly shows how his life stretches the full age of the 250 years we just went through.
The world is altogether so different from what it was when I was young that it's an extraordinarily difficult thing for an old man to live in such a world. I was born in 1872. My parents died when I was still an infant, and so I was brought up by my grandparents.
Can you tell us something about your grandfather?
Yes, I can tell you something about my grandfather. He was born in the early years of the French Revolution. He was a member of Parliament while Napoleon was still on the throne. In common with all the Whig followers of Fox, he thought English hostility to Napoleon was excessive, and he visited Napoleon in Elba.
I hope you liked this video. I try to make the maps as accurate as possible and do indicate if you see mistakes or you disagree with my analysis. I appreciate well-founded criticism and will try and incorporate it in the next videos, and I will definitely engage with you. Many thanks for watching and making it this far, as I truly appreciate your attention. Thank you very much.